Clement, and thanks for watching I'm a Lady Like That. Dr. Norton, thanks for joining us.
Good to be here.
You are the visiting professor here at Seminary of the Southwest for
Yes.
the calendar year of 2020-2021.
Mhm.
I know you've been here for almost coming up on a year.
Yeah, we're coming to the end of the year. Yeah.
But welcome to Austin still.
Thank you. Thank
Because
you.
you've never lived here before.
I have not.
So you are currently the visiting professor here at Seminary of the Southwest.
I am.
You are a professor of Black Religious Studies.
Mhm.
You've taught courses on the Introduction to the Old Testament, Ruth, Womanist Biblical Interpretation. You've taught courses on Hebrew reading, and you've gotten some media attention with your Beyonce Mass.
Yes.
You've taught many lectures on these subjects, having taught at Moravian Theological Seminary in Pennsylvania,
Mhm.
Wesley Theological Seminary in D.C.,
Mhm.
Vanderbilt University in Nashville.
Mhm.
You've done ministry in D.C., Maryland, and you're an ordained minister in the Christian church and a licensed Baptist minister.
Yes.
Incredible. So you didn't always think you would be going into seminary.
No.
So tell us about that.
Yeah. So, I'm a Black woman from the South. So, as a Black woman from the South, you very easily learn to identify by your denomination. People ask you things like, "Who are your parents? What do they do? And what church do you go to?" And so, growing up, culturally, I just knew that the right answer was Baptist, right, from
Right.
my family context, but I internally thought, I don't really believe in any of this. And we didn't go to church growing up. So I would have self identified, though not verbally, as at best agnostic. And as a young adult, was exploring all the things and pushing all the boundaries that one can push. And
Right.
then the summer between my freshman and sophomore year had this kind of ecstatic experience of religion and just found myself answering the altar call and committing my life to Christ. And so have been in the church since 2001. So I did the opposite of what people do. People go to college and they lose their religion. I
Yeah.
went to college and I found my religion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very unique story.
Yeah.
So you have taken on studying, researching and interpreting the womanist perspective in the Bible. So how did you go from finding Christ to taking this on and teaching it?
Yeah, so I always remember in high school, my 10th grade English teacher said, "You got to read the Bible." A very visceral reaction to that, and she said, I don't care what you believe." It was a public school. She said, "It's a number one bestseller, and you don't understand literature, pop culture, anything really, unless you have some grasp on what the Bible says." Just so hearing her offer that as not a normative statement, not a you should believe these things, but you should understand how this thing is used. As a person of faith, that stuck with me. And so I found myself constantly paying attention to in my early years as a Christian, paying attention to how are people forming my identity for me based on the text, particularly as a Black woman.
Right.
I also found myself, when you don't grow up in Sunday school, you read the Bible very differently. So when I would come to church as an adult and people would say things to me like, "There's one creation story," and I'm reading, which most Christians don't do. I'm actually reading the Bible.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, that's what I read is not what you're telling me.
Right.
So it sparked a kind of curiosity for me. And I think that was a piece of why I became so invested in investigating and interrogating the Bible. I think there's also this component, when I finally acquiesced to going to get a PhD, I couldn't decide between homiletics, study of preaching,
Right.
ethics, and Bible, particularly Hebrew Bible, Old Testament. And I remember two things. I remember the first time I read that there were less than 30 Black women with PhDs in Hebrew Bible. And I remember Katie Cannon, who's just kind of the mother of womanist thought,
Yeah.
saying that she had started her PhD in Hebrew Bible. and she went through coursework, and she went through qualifying exams. And her dissertation proposal was going to be on the 8th century prophets as precursors to Black prophetic preaching. And her advisor told her that wasn't a Bible dissertation. She couldn't do it. And so she was left with the choice. She ended up going back, doing coursework in ethics, taking comps in ethics, which to me is just a nightmare.
Absolutely.
I would never. I just would have quit. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, good for her.
Yeah, and so she had a PhD in theology and ethics, and I thought to myself, well, and because she was one of my conversation partners when I was entertaining going into a PhD program, I thought, well, then we've got to make a stand.
Yes.
Right? Like now is the moment for Black women to take up space in this guild.
Right.
And so it was both a deep-seated love for the text and investigating texts, and a deep-seated love for who Black women are.
Yeah.
And wanting us to take up space in theological education.
Absolutely. One of my questions was going to be, have you faced controversy like Katie Cannon faced?
Yeah. I mean, I think the reality is that the Bible, and particularly Hebrew Bible, are kind of the strongest bastions of racism and patriarchy in the theological guild, right? It is difficult for people to see the person standing in front of them talking about their sacred foundational text and have that person not look anything like them, right?
Right.
And I know this because I was a student in Bible classes, and I never saw people who looked like me.
Right.
And so, yeah, all the time, I encountered this kind of isolation, this sense of like, I don't understand how you're reading the text this way, and a lot of pushback, because as a biblical scholar, I'm really unapologetic in saying, this is not an objective discipline. What we're doing is not a science, it is an art. And yes, we are historians, and yes, we are literary scholars, but history is valued objectively. Or subjectively, excuse me. And so
Right.
because we value history subjectively, who you are impacts how you read the text, and who I am impacts how I read the text. And that doesn't make my reading of the text wrong.
Right. Absolutely. One of the things that maybe you're most known for in this community is Beyonce Mass.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us. Take it away.
I had started in ministry. I was licensed Baptist minister, and as a young Black woman in ministry, of course, there was always a like, oh, this is new. We haven't done this before. Had a Black woman, or had a woman, because they're all Black churches, had a young woman in the pulpit. And so I constructed what to me was like the fun, more contemporary, like what's a newer generation's version of the novel? It's music, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about Beyonce as a Black woman. And let's interrogate racism and sexism. Let's talk about respectability politics and embodiment and all of these issues that Black women face. And so when I was developing the class, I decided to put a chapel service as one of the first assignments. Let's have a worship service that centers Black women, because that doesn't happen. And in that service, let's tell their story. Let's narrate something about their experience. Let's offer testimony. Let's show appreciation for how God moves the life, spirit, being of Black women. So now we have our own singers, and
Wow.
the project has just evolved. And we're starting to think about what are the other projects, what are the other things that we do outside of worship.
Yeah.
That help us tell something about Black women's stories and shift the way that Black girls and Black women see themselves.
And see themselves in affiliation with the church and
Absolutely.
and their relationships with Christ, being heard.
Yeah. So one of my big taglines in the worship service is to look out and say to people, because most of the people I'm looking at have been hurt by the church, right?
Yeah.
In some way.
Yeah.
To look out and say that you are the thing that God had in mind when she looked out over creation and declared it's good. right? So to be able to look at the sea of Black women, of trans people, of just one of my favorite moments in one of our two New York masses was like there was this church mother who had big church hat on,
Yeah, I love it.
sitting next to a drag queen. And I thought, that's it.
This is it.
This is beloved community.
Yes.
And so to be able to look out and to worship in that kind of congregation, in that kind of community, yeah, we have to find the ways to replicate that over and over again.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have absolute faith that you will continue doing that. And it's
Yeah, we're working
been
on
incredible.
it.
I mean, just hearing about it, I'm like, I just feel I know. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's incredible.
Yeah. So we love the work. Right before we were at the Kennedy Center, and I thought to myself, I wonder how many times the Kennedy Center has reached out and asked to have church.
Yeah.
Right? And so what does it mean that we've been able to build something
Right.
that reaches multiple spaces? It was the last thing we did before the pandemic, and we've spent the past year developing modes of virtual worship and developing other projects that help Black girls and Black women see themselves as more than an afterthought of creation.
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. Seriously, full body chills. It's incredible.
Thank you.
It's just so incredibly powerful.
So every day, I find in the pandemic, I have to go searching for Christ every day.
Yeah.
Because I don't see a whole lot of anything other than the walls of my house.
Right.
But I do, there's this moment in The Color Purple where Celie says, I may be poor, I may be Black, I may be ugly, but I'm still here. And so I've done several things around womanist thought, events, symposia, and the theme has been, but I'm still here.
Yeah.
And so in a COVID-19 reality, I find God, I find Jesus in the I'm still here.
Wow.
Right? Like we have lost so much.
Yeah.
And so many people this year. And so the gift of being alive, of having a home, right? Because there are tons of people who have lost jobs, who've lost their house. So for all the things that I still have, when so many people are losing so much, that everyday need to remind myself, because it's really easy to get caught up in I can't travel the way that I used to. I can't give the lectures. I've lost money.
Right.
But that looks really different when you still have a job.
Right. Right.
And so that right now is where I'm experiencing God, is in a space of gratefulness in the midst of crisis. I experience on a pre-pandemic and during pandemic moment, I experience God and experience Christ in the form of Black women. Right? Like, those are my conversation partners. Those are the people I'm fighting for on a daily basis. And that fight feels like a gift. And so that's where I find God.
Dr. Norton, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I feel incredibly enlightened and invigorated, and I want to go to Beyonce Mass. I want to listen to all your lectures. I want everyone to hear all your lectures. And thank you so much for your time and sharing all of this with us.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.